Ever since I got my hands on a copy of Kirby Mass Attack as a kid, I've been a fan of the Kirby franchise. Whether you come for the mainline experience and its consistency, or the wackier spin-offs, there's always a lot of charm and some fun times. Which is why I decided to start the Grand Kirby Project. Basically, without my friend Sammy, I'm going to 100% every Kirby game on my Let's Play channel, the Flightship. After each game, Sammy and I are going to both draw our interpretations of every copy ability in each game, and I am going to review each game on this channel called Captain's Log, which is what you're watching right now. So I invite you to join us as we explore every Kirby game ever, made ever in the history of ever existing, starting with Kirby's Dream Land, the first one. But before we do that, a disclaimer. This is not an objective review of Kirby's Dream Land. This is the ramblings of a guy who just so happens to possess emotions and an iPhone camera, and I'm going to talk about the experience I had playing this game. That also means there's going to be spoilers, as I'm covering my whole experience. With that out of the way, let's establish how I played this game. So, I actually remember playing Kirby's Dream Land as a kid because it was part of Kirby's Dream Collection, which might make you think it's at least easy to play physically. But you'd be wrong, because Kirby's Dream Collection is a Kirby video game. So I can't play Kirby's Dream Land on Kirby's Dream Collection, because then it's not, I need to save it for the Kirby's Dream Collection experience!
You know, I always wonder what a Descent into Madness looks like.
Okay, I know it sounds stupid, but to be fair, we were going to need a way to play the Game Boy games that weren't on Kirby's Dream Collection anyway. So it's best that we figure this kind of thing out now. So anyway, this leaves us with two options on how we're going to be playing Kirby's Dream Land. Option 1. I could buy the Game Boy player and attach it to the GameCube that allows players to play their Game Boy games on the TV. I just need to also buy a GameCube, the overpriced startup disc, RCA to HDMI cables, a GBA to control with GBA to GameCube cables, and the game itself. Option 2. I buy a 3DS capture card and get the games off the 3DS eShop for cheap. Okay, so I started this project in the summer of 2020, around the time the last main 3DS capture card manufacturer, Kitty, had recently gone out of business. Plus, ever since my Wii broke, I couldn't play any of the GameCube games in my admittedly small collection, so I kinda needed a GameCube anyway. And hey, now I possess all the attachments to play Pac-Man Versus. That's pretty neat. So why does any of this matter? Well, for one thing, I have this constant reminder that I can press the Z button. The Game Boy player also makes this border around the gameplay to reconcile the differences between the GBA aspect ratio and the GameCube aspect ratio. Of course, you might notice that my gameplay doesn't actually fit in that border because the Game Boy has an entirely separate aspect ratio. Pressing the L button stretches the gameplay footage to fit the GBA aspect ratio, an effect I like to call wide. The R button reverses this monstrosity. Another thing the Game Boy Advance had that the Game Boy didn't is color. The Game Boy Color, GBA, and Game Boy Player all have a bunch of manual color palettes that can be applied to original Game Boy titles, including a grayscale option and a reverse option that can be applied by pressing different button combinations while the Game Boy Startup logo is on the screen. Some games, like Kirby's Dream Land, even have custom color palettes that will automatically apply themselves, meaning when I first tested this copy of Kirby's Dream Land, I was greeted with a pink Kirby, despite the fact that on the cart he's white. The color palettes are somewhat limited by technical stuff I don't understand, but I still think they're pretty cool. The last and most important aspect of this version is saving. Unlike with the 3DS version, there's no save states. Death usually means a respawn at the beginning of the room, while game over means you have to start the entire stage over. This is fairly forgiving for the time period. The game does give you unlimited continues, but the game doesn't have a save feature, or even a password system. So you do have to complete the game in one run. Oh, and there's one last thing that I just couldn't leave out of the review. See, we actually didn't play the game, most of the game, on this cartridge that I've been using as a prop, which is the official version. See, originally on eBay, I got a custom-made version cartridge. See if you can spot the subtle differences. So yeah, I'm an idiot. They even provided pictures, and in the description it said custom made. I don't know what happened here. Well, with that out of the way, it's time to actually talk about the game's story. Don't worry, it's pretty short. King Dedede stole all the food in Dreamland as well as the sparkling stars, which generate food. Go get them back! That's it! I actually expected to find a bunch of quirks that conflicted with future entries, but instead I found weirdly the opposite. In the manual, Dreamland is described as a special place on a tiny star far away from Earth, which establishes Dreamland is both on an alien planet, and that is not the entirety of said planet, both elements that I thought were introduced much later. Also, the 5 areas you explore in the game are referred to as in King Dedede's realm, which means it's totally okay that you keep killing everyone. So, anyway, yeah, to the surprise of absolutely no one, there's no complex on Kirby's Dream Land. I don't know what you expect. What? Oh, it's my future self. I have to take this. Hello? The what? The butterfly, like the one in Greens? And you're sure this is vital to the Kirby lore? Well, good to know I'll go insane in the future. I'm hanging up now. Maybe I should just get on to the actual game now. Booting up the title screen immediately establishes the tone of the game. There's a bouncy tune playing along to these bouncy Kirbys marching across the screen. It gives me this sense of whimsy, which carries on throughout the entire game. There are a bunch of enemies that don't even attack and are just there for aesthetic value. The game is something that I like to call fluff scenes, cutscenes that appear before each area that don't advance the plot or show useful information, but just portray Kirby doing stuff, chasing butterflies, fishing, just generally enjoying the adventure he's on. Similarly, he does this cute little dance after defeating a boss. These scenes help me get a feel for Kirby's cheerful character, which is impressive considering Kirby kinda just has a blank expression on his face the entire game. All of this charm also seeps into the soundtrack. Of course, the most famous piece here is Greens, but the rest of the soundtrack is also pretty solid. All of them fit the feel of the game perfectly. Interestingly, the boss theme in this game seems to mirror King Dedede's theme at the start, something that later boss themes didn't do despite King Dedede's theme keeping the start up. Speaking of King Dedede's theme, only on half of it is here because the other half wasn't added until Kirby Superstar, and that brings up one of my few issues with the music in this game. Every single one of these songs has been remixed and used later on in the series, and a lot of those are the better versions. Still, this game did create the iconic themes in the first place, and for that it should get credit. Of course, a game can't live on charm alone. How does Kirby actually play? Now, if you already know Kirby, most of this should be familiar to you. Obviously, Kirby can move left and right with the control pad, as well as pressing up to use Kirby's infinite hover. There's no run button, and for most of the game that's not an issue, but for some parts of the game, he just doesn't feel fast enough. Pressing B will allow Kirby to inhale his enemies. From there, he can either spit them out with B or get one of his signature copy abilities by swallowing. Okay, some enemies don't give copy abilities. What about this one? This one? This one? Oh, come on, I know Sir Kibble gives Cutter.
Philip, there's no copy abilities in this game. Kirby only gained that power in future entries.
Huh, well that changes things. In most Kirby games, you acquire a copy ability and then rampage your way through the rest of the level. Removing copy abilities means that Kirby is very limited in means of attack. When playing through a stage, this means that you start to develop a pattern of alternating between sucking and spitting enemies, giving it a somewhat unique rhythm. Although, you still pretty much rampage through stages as almost every enemy is able to be sucked up, so not much has really changed. Pressing A causes Kirby to jump without floating. This might seem like a useless addition, but trust me, it comes in handy. Finally, the start button pauses the game, where you can see this dancing Kirby Easter egg, and pressing A, B, start, and select restarts the game. Because of the lack of copy abilities, the game actually has a few basic traditional power-ups. Emphasis on basic. The microphone is a screen nuke that would later be adapted into a copy ability. The invincibility candy makes you, well, invincible. The spicy curry and mint breath give Kirby unlimited projectiles for a short time, with the only difference between them being that mint breath forces Kirby to inflate and spicy curry is deactivated by water. Interestingly, the warp stars and sparkling stars are listed in the manual as items, even though they're basically just screen transitions. It also lists health restores as items, and has some interesting naming discrepancies. The game is segmented into 5 levels: Greens, Castle Lololo, Float Islands, Bubbly Clouds, and Mount Dedede. Each level consists of a couple of rooms with various obstacles in it, and a boss. It's a pretty short game, the whole thing took me around 40 minutes. Green starts as a field that transitions into a forest, going from green to green. Good name. The level is pretty easy to just run straight through. Papa Rose Sr. appears right before the forest is a mid-boss, and he bounces around and throws bombs at you. The main boss of the area is, of course, Wispy Woods. He's completely stationary, and you have to use his apples to attack. I beat him in one try. Castle Lololo is this spooky maze castle thing, filled with branching paths. Kind of. There's one main path through the area, and the rest of the doors are optional side rooms. The only thing that is close to a branching path is here, where one of these doors leads through 2 extra rooms before leading to the exact same room the other door led to. It does do a somewhat decent job of feeling like stumbling through a labyrinth though. This stage has Lololo as a mid-boss. He comes out of one of 4 doors, throws his box, and then leaves. Beating him just requires spinning his boxes back at him. The main boss is Lololo and La. They're interesting because they're an early cameo with the adventures of Lolo. I think they added an extra syllable to each of their names to match King Dedede and Kirby's prototype name, Popopo. As for the actual boss, they walk at you. But the challenge of the boss comes with figuring how to get that block to damage them. Okay, I tried my best. These guys are lambs. Beat them in one go. Float Island starts with you hopping from island to island before you enter a cave. After the cave, you explore a ship, and then ride a warp star into a whale, which blows you into the clouds with its blowhole. This stage seems to have the most set pieces, fully exploring its beachy setting. In later Kirby games, each of these elements would have probably been separate levels in a water world. The whale is particularly interesting to me, as it is entirely contained within a cutscene, which was unnecessary as the warp star could already get to the clouds. It's just an extra bit of charm. Another notable thing is Float Islands has the first 1-ups in the game, as well as a spicy curry. There's no mid-boss in this stage, and the main boss of the stage is Kabula. She's the most unique boss in the game. You fight using a version of the Mint Leaf without a timer, suddenly turning the game into a shoot-'em-up. Kabula is the only boss that can actually be hurt by air puffs, but it takes 5 puffs to do 1 damage. Plus, Kabula has 8 pieces of health, meaning you have to hit Kabula 40 times instead of the usual 6. Luckily, this is evened out by the ability to rapid-fire air puffs that comes with the Mint Leaf. I still beat her in one shot, but the change in pace felt refreshing and fun to play. This quick firefight in the sky really stands out. Bubbly Clouds picks up right where Float Islands left off, in the clouds. As you climb the cloud castle higher and higher, you start to get up into space. This is the last main stage in the game, and is appropriately the hardest. Not that I'd say it's actually hard. It also introduced one of the few enemies that you can't suck up, the Scarfy. Trying to inhale them just makes them angry, and they explode, which makes them infuriating to deal with. This stage has 3 1-ups, a mint leaf, and a spicy curry in it. Kracko Jr. is the mid-boss, who swoops and swerves around, throwing bullets at enemies at Kirby. He just kind of repeats the exact same pattern, so you can figure out a strategy that works 100% of the time on him. The boss is Kracko. He has 3 attacks, his lightning, throwing a waddle-doo, and swooping. He'll either be at the left or right side of the screen, and you want to be on the opposite side so you avoid the lightning. Kracko was definitely trickier than Wispy or Lolo and La, and he hit me a few times by swooping when I didn't expect it. That being said, I still beat him in one try. The final stage of the game is basically a boss rush, with a mini version of each boss's stage right before their fight. The boss's room will be blocked by this special Gordo, which will kill you in one hit, which can only be destroyed by touching this thing. What exactly it is never elaborated on, but it looks like Kirby, and touching it kills all the enemies in a room, including the Gordo. Another weird oddity about this stage is the music. When you first enter, it plays Dedede's theme, and then when you enter one of the mini-stages, it plays that stage's theme. However, the boss theme doesn't play, except for Kabula's, which is tied to the Mint Leaf item, and when you go back to Mount Dedede proper, it plays a different theme. After beating all 4 bosses, you get to fight King Dedede himself. Like Kirby, they do a lot to characterize the king. He's a dark mirror of Kirby, being a lot closer to Kirby's size than the other bosses, and copying Kirby's inhale attack. It's no coincidence Dedede's main crime is stealing all the food, mirroring Kirby's insatiable appetite. The king jumps around to pound Kirby with a noticeable thump, and he uses a hammer to try and smash Kirby. These things imply strength, but he's also kind of a goof. He hangs pictures of himself around the callus, and he sometimes trips. Despite this, compared to the other bosses, he really does feel like the final boss, which is fitting because this is one of the last times he'll actually be one. And I just beat him in one go, with half health. And that's about it. It's a really quick, really easy romp through Dreamland. It's a charming experience to be sure, but the gameplay had a hard time engaging me. I don't want to put up the too easy argument because plenty of Kirby games are both easy and engaging. They have puzzles and collectibles and copy abilities. As unique as this game is without them, the copy abilities provide variety. The only variety in this game was the Kabula fight, and that is the best fight in the game, but otherwise it's just a straight shot to the end. My general opinion is just that the game exists. I mean, yeah, it's the first, and the whole no copy abilities thing is cool, but otherwise there's no reason to go back to it. But that's not really the end, is it? Once you beat Kirby's Dream Land, the game shows you the code for Extra Game. Basically, it's hard mode. Unlike the main game, I'd actually never played Kirby's Dream Land Extra Game before. I wasn't really expecting much based on future entries into the Kirby series, but you know, it wouldn't be 100% playthrough of Kirby's Dream Land if I just ignored a whole mode, right? So, I fired everything back up, switched the color palette to grayscale for variety, and I started playing. I expected it to take around the same amount of time as normal game. It didn't. Okay, so what exactly does Extra Game actually do? The first thing I noticed is that some enemies behave differently, like those jumping Waddle Dees. The next thing I noticed is some enemies do more damage. Generally, what once took 1 health now takes 2. Then this happened.
Oh, what is that?
Apparently, the majority of enemies have just been straight up replaced. The new enemies usually behave similarly, but slightly differently from the enemies they replace. A fair amount of these enemies are just faster, but some are pretty weird, like Blopper, who replaces Cappy. Oh, and none of these changes apply to the Scarfies, because they're already the worst. Then I got to Poppy Bros Sr., and I died on him, twice. And it was at this point that I realized that Extra Game is actually pretty cool. In normal game, I beat pretty much all the bosses in one try. In Extra Game, the first mid-boss has already killed me. Every boss and mid-boss has been revamped, and they are now the most engaging parts of the game. Remember that thing I said earlier about how Kirby has limited attacks, but it doesn't really matter because you can just suck up most enemies? Now it matters. Bosses can't be sucked up or harmed by air poofs, so they have to be attacked by spitting back projectiles. This places emphasis on agility and dodging while waiting for an opening, because you can't just attack whenever. The trade-off for being able to fly forever is that an inflated Kirby is slower and has a larger hitbox, making it a last resort in fights. See, I told you that jump, float, split would be useful. All of these traits are technically present in normal game, but it doesn't matter because all the bosses are super easy. Going back to the first mini-boss, Poppy Bros Sr., he's mostly just faster, and instead of doing this jumpy thing, he does this dashy thing. This might not seem like big changes, but this guy managed to kill me at full health, so it's a lot harder than it looks. Still, he only has 3 health, and he stays to the right side of the screen, so he isn't too hard. Wispy Woods has gained the ability to drop Gordos instead of just apples. This is a move I knew about from later Kirby games, but I didn't think it would appear here because I didn't see it during normal game. His wind attack is also way faster, to the point where I'm unsure if it's possible to react in time to dodge. Luckily, the wind still does only 1 damage, so I could damage boost through it pretty easily. What I find interesting about Wispy is that he's designed around Kirby's moveset in this game specifically. In most games, Wispy Woods' stationary nature makes him an easy target to wail on with copy abilities, and he's a pathetically easy boss. Here, however, you have to wait to get one of his apples to attack. In normal game, this doesn't matter because he just throws apples, while in Extra Game, Wispy also drops Gordos. Now the fight is all about dodging the Gordos, which can take you out in 2 hits, while trying to minimize the amount of chip damage from the air puffs and apples. Wololo has been given a speed up like most enemies, but he also shoots out a Gordo after his block. Because of that Gordo, you generally want to get the block and get out, jumping away in time to not get hit. He spends the same amount of time doing his attack each time, but the bottom doors have a longer path, so he walks faster on them. Since Kirby's Spit Stars all travel at the same speed, it's easiest to hit Wololo on the top 2 floors. Wololo and Walala, walk faster. Oh, come on, guys! It's Extra Game! Your chance to add something cool, and this is what you do with it! Okay, to be fair, they're actually the same speed as Kirby, which means it's a pretty tight squeeze to suck up their blocks. Kind of. But they only do 1 damage. Plus, it being harder to get the block means that more of their fight involves waiting for them to randomly generate into favorable conditions. Not even Extra Game can save these two. Extra Game Kabula is pretty hard. She's the most random boss in the game, making her very unpredictable. Some shots are so fast I don't think it's humanly possible to react to them fast enough to dodge. The fight was still fun to play, but I was really at the mercy of the RNG. In Float Islands I beat her first try, but my subsequent fights on Mount Dedede had me losing again and again. Kracko Jr. is, well, just look at this. He still does the exact same thing over and over again, but he has a brand new path that goes through every part of the screen, and he's doing it with twice the speed. He's replaced his Waddle Doos with bombs, which means that they have to be sucked in before they hit the ground. Because he's technically 100% predictable, it's possible to find a pattern that works 100% of the time, but he moves so fast and his path is so erratic that it's really hard to find that pattern. I just hid in the corner for as long as possible, so I only had to dodge one swoop, and took advantage of the fact that he has half my health. Kracko himself is also much faster now. Instead of going from side to side, he stays in the middle and his swoop attack goes after the corners. He's also exchanged his Waddle Doo for a full bomb sweep, and the added RNG means that this is one of the tough—
Hey, I think you can cheese it just by standing in the corner again.
Really? What about the little swoopy thing?
You can just jump over that. You don't even have to float. The lightning doesn't hit there, and you can just suck up the bomb.
Huh. Well, that was anticlimactic. So the king moves much faster, and his jump attack goes farther. Those are pretty much the only changes to the fight. Even his attacks still only do 1 damage, and yet he feels a lot harder this time. I think a big part of this is just that his attacks are telegraphed for this speed to be tough but fair, which means when I was being careful in his normal game fight, I could see his attacks coming way farther in advance than I should have. His attacks consist of a trip, an inhale, various jumps, and the hammer attack. He's gonna trip or inhale if he starts running without his hammer out. It's impossible to tell which he's gonna do, but that's okay because to deal with both, I just jump over him. The inhale is a bit trickier to avoid than the trip, and it has a longer animation when it hits, so I generally hope for a trip. If he starts running with his hammer out, it means he's gonna use it. He hammers where Kirby was when he takes the hammer out, so if I have space, I just walk back a few steps so I can suck up the star the hammer generates. Unlike most Kirby games, the stars actually hurt, so it's important to keep that in mind. If Kirby is in the air when Dedede pulls out his hammer, he's going to do a jump hammer attack. This doesn't generate a star, and is one of the trickier attacks to avoid, so I float as little as possible in the fight. The only other attack that generates stars is Dedede's standard jump attacks. You can tell he's going to do this because he crouches. He'll either jump straight up, jump through a full arc, or get halfway through an arc and then fall straight down. Whatever jump he does, he'll create 2 stars on either side of him. The important thing to remember about this attack is to stay aware of where he's landing. The stars don't stay long, so it's important to be ready to snatch them up. I think this might be my favorite extra game boss, mostly because of the fairness aspect. The attacks are all hard to avoid, and yet unlike Wispy or Kabula, there were no attacks that felt too fast to dodge. Getting a game over on Dedede actually restarts with him already unlocked, which is the only time a game over doesn't result in doing the entire stage over. This is a really nice change because it means I can just focus on fighting Dedede uninterrupted. It feels like a proper finale to this mode. But even though the bosses were the most engaging part of the gameplay, it's not the only reason I liked extra games so much. Another part of it is all the changes they made. A lot of specific changes stuck out to me, like how the parasols now home in on you and the coconuts now explode. It felt like anything could happen. There was a point in my playthrough where I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if these random aesthetic stars hurt you in extra game? Too bad they would never— oh wait, they do! And then I had an epiphany. Throughout writing this review, I've been trying to pinpoint exactly what I love so much about this version of extra game. At first I thought it was just all the changes and the bosses being more difficult. But then I realized, these are all symptomatic. The real reason I love this version of extra game so much is because it feels like it was meant to be played after normal game.
Yeah, it's a hard mode. Of course it's meant to be played after the easy mode.
Okay, so let me explain. My first experience with Kirby Extra Game was with Kirby's Return to Dreamland for the Wii. And even as a child, I thought to myself, well, why are we doing this? It's just the same game again. And the thing is, I like this version of Extra Game. But that just changed the question to, well, why did I need to play the normal game first? The thing is, with Kirby's Dreamland, you can actually do the extra game first. Because there's no save function, extra game is locked behind a code, which could easily be Googled. making this one of the only extra games that you can play before normal game. And yet, it's also the only extra game I've played where I'd recommend you not doing that, because a lot of things about this game make a ton more sense when you would consider both modes.
Let's look at those aesthetic stars again. Why did my brain automatically jump to the conclusion that they should hurt you? Well, Extra Game already turned previously aesthetic things against me before this, like the parasols I talked about and this bird. The normal game version of this room has no real obstacles, you just blast through blocks with spicy curry. What is the point of this room? These blocks in the tiny corridor make a lot more sense if they're meant to limit mobility while you're asked to dodge something, and the logical thing to dodge would be these stars. You're already primed to think of these stars as obstacles, and when you get here in Extra Game, the stars are suddenly blinking. Now, even though those stars don't look anything like any other enemy in the game, the player immediately makes the connection that they hurt you now. Let's look at another example. There's this bonus room in Bubbly Clouds, accessed by using the moon as a door. You have to maneuver while falling in this room to get all this stuff before it falls to the floor. This is a fine enough challenge, but why are there 2 maximum tomatoes in here? Nothing can hurt you in this room. Oh, that's why. Also, they turned the second one up into a Waddle Dee, which just looks funny falling among the Gordos. Even when just looking at Extra Game editions, the game maintains its charm. These first 2 Waddle Dees in normal game subconsciously teach players basic lessons about how to deal with enemies. Suck them up or jump over them and don't run straight into them. The same Waddle Dees in Extra Game are meant to subvert those lessons. And finally, my favorite example, this coconut. In Extra Game, they made it fall on the other side. That's amazing. Now, I will admit, some of these might seem a bit unfair. The Blatchies often fire too fast to reasonably dodge. Like, seriously, what am I supposed to do here? Oh, and shout out to the first room of Bubbly Cloud for the most BS in one room. It begins with an enemy immediately charging at you. Then it's got a non-stop firing Blatzy, Scarfies, those parasols I talked about earlier, and enemies that come from off-screen too fast to dodge. These moments definitely drag Extra Game down, but they could never completely ruin it for me. There's also some extra goodies gotten from beating Extra Game. It starts out the same as beating normal game, but after the credits roll, there's an enemy roll call. I love these things. There's something nice about learning exactly what's been trying to kill you.
Maybe the true Extra Game was the enemies' names we learned along the way.
Both the normal and Extra Game enemies are named, giving a sense of finality to things. It feels like you beat the game for real. There's also another code after the enemy roll call, accompanied by a new animation. The code is for Config Mode and More Fun. Config Mode allows you to adjust the amount of lives and health you have. More Fun refers to the sound test. Both are pretty neat additions.
Most reviews of this game don't really spend much time on Extra Game, and I find that a real shame. I was engaged throughout the entirety of my Extra Game experience, and it even made my normal game playthrough retroactively more worthwhile. I'd go as far as to say that a playthrough of this game without Extra Game isn't really a complete playthrough at all. I'm really glad I gave it a shot.
So, finally 100% of the first game on this journey.
Although, what does 100% really mean? I mean, it's not like it keeps track or anything.
I mean, you played through normal mode and extra mode, that's all the modes there are.
There is config mode.
How would you play through config mode, though? Unless, Philip, no.
And can you really say
no.
that you've completed the game?
No!
If you haven't even done its hardest challenge?
No!
Well, here we go again. We decided to use an inverted color palette for this run, if you couldn't tell by the footage. Now we can use the power of technology to actually figure out what this looks like non-inverted. And interestingly, it doesn't match the color palette that Kirby's Dream Land has, nor the grayscale version. Instead, it appears to match the palette that happens when you press down on the start screen. I'm not really sure why, but it doesn't really matter anyway. What really matters is what config mode actually does.
We discovered config mode set the maximum vitality Kirby had, and no amount of food would bring that number high. However, config mode only sets the amount of lives we started with, so on-ups could still give us more lives.
The weird thing about this run is there really isn't that much to say about it. It didn't change how I looked at the whole game like Extra Game did, but it also wasn't the same experience as my first run.
Things became more and more stressful the closer I got to the end of the level, with the knowledge that I would have to do it all over if I screwed up. Then, when I did screw up, it was extremely frustrating, which usually just caused me to screw up more before I got back to where I was. It was technically more engaging than my first run, but it was way less enjoyable. Sammy and I theorized that it might be more fun to play with 1 vitality and 9 lives, which might take away the stress and frustration of having to play the whole level again, while keeping the challenge of having to avoid every enemy. We never tested this, however, because we were already doing 4 runs of this game, and as having both minimum health and minimum lives were harder, it was the run I felt I needed to do to truly 100% the game. Whatever that means.
And there's another reason we're stressed out. Time. See, Sammy and I can't meet up all the time because we have lives. And we can't play this online because we're using a Game Boy player. The entirety of the normal, extra, and whatever weird run this is, we recorded in 1 day. And by the end of that day, we weren't sure if we were going to make it. And remember, this game has no save function. If we don't finish the run, we do it all again.
And that is why the checkpoint before King Dedede was a godsend. The fact that I had no lives no longer mattered, as if I died, I'd simply come back right at Dedede, removing the main source of stress and frustration during the run. Because of this, King Dedede's fight was the most fun part of the run.
In the end, the run's just unsatisfying. I mean, extra game took longer, but this run is way less fun to play than extra game. I mean, if you really want to do something like it, just do minimum health, maximum lives. If the Dedede fight is any indication, it might actually be fun. And yeah, that's about what we planned to cover with this game. We were going to do a run-through of all 3 modes, and do an extra episode for sound test, and we actually thought we were going to be on to Kirby's Adventure that very day. And, well, the game gave us a lot more than we thought it would. Hey, wait a minute! You said you'd be doing the hardest run in the game. What about extra game minimum lives, minimum health? Honestly, it never crossed my mind. In my entire time planning out my Kirby's Dream Land playthrough, I never thought about mixing extra game and config mode. I just thought of normal game, extra game, and config mode as separate modes, and therefore gave a playthrough to each of them.
It was only when I was setting up the config mode run that I realized config mode and extra game could mix.
Wait, so do we combine them? Can we combine them?
Oh, no.
Can we combine them?
Yep.
Yeah.
That taste of just how hard minimum health extra game was made me uncertain if I truly wanted to attempt it, especially since I didn't particularly enjoy the normal game version of the run.
But it was the true hardest challenge in the game, so I decided to do it. It was going to be tough, but I thought if we have the whole day to do it, I think we'll make it. I was wrong.
September 19th, 2020. Sammy and I meet up and start the attempt. I play for hours. It's grueling work. One slip bringing me back to square one. Half the day is gone, but finally, we beat it. Wispy Woods. Yeah, Green Greens was way harder than I thought it would be. A lot of the same problems from normal game are exacerbated by being an extra game. I started noticing specific parts of the level that I didn't the first time because I damage boosted through them. Like this part where you have to weave between this blopper and these Koozers. Or this room, where a bunch of Koozers came down from the top or right of the screen and rush at you with little to no warning. So you just gotta memorize where they are. I love this room! And while the parts around these BS bits aren't too bad, when you're playing for hours on end, you start to screw up even on the easy bits. I have no idea how many times the stupid jumping Waddle Dees killed me, and that's not even going over the bosses. Poppy Bro Sr. is what originally made me excited about extra game. My strategy for this guy was to simply suck in his bombs and shoot him back. Most of the time he'd either jump out of the way or block my bomb with another bomb. Having to face him with only 1 health forced me to make a drastic overhaul with how I tackled this boss. It forced me to jump. Yeah, this works way better. But Poppy Bro Sr. isn't the main boss of Green Greens. That honor belongs to Wispy Woods. Wispy was definitely harder in extra game than normal game, but only the Gordos did more than 1 damage, so I usually tanked a lot of the other attacks. Minimum health forced me to truly get good at dodging all of Wispy's attacks. And I learned a few tricks. The apples and Gordos behave the exact same way, and in this mode they both kill you, so the only difference is that one of them you want to eventually nab as a projectile. They fall straight down, and when they hit the ground they bounce towards Kirby and keep going across the entire screen. Each bounce they do gets progressively smaller, and they can generally be jumped over, but the first bounce is actually high enough to be dodged under, even when Kirby has an apple inhaled. This is a pretty simple set of attacks, but it creates a fight with no safe areas and a need to dodge every attack. On top of that, Kirby needs to attack back. Ammunition is fairly abundant, but that doesn't mean you can just attack whenever. Pretty much everything from air puffs to Gordos will block you, and inhaling leaves you vulnerable. All of this makes an environment where we have to improvise, every second making snap decisions about whether to inhale or jump, dodge under or over, try to use both apples or play it safe with one, make the wrong decision, and... For the first time, I really started to respect Wispy Woods. He's appeared in almost every Kirby game, and he's usually so easy he's forgettable. But that's because he was specifically designed to run Kirby's moves in this game. And it's kind of beautiful to see him in a context where he thrives. And then these air puffs come in and ruin everything. Now, on some level, I do appreciate these things. They give you a reason to dodge under objects, which is usually harder than jumping. The farther from Wispy you are, the more time you have to react, but the less space you have to do so, creating pros and cons to each side. But none of that matters because they come out so fast you can't consistently dodge them. Worse, because Wispy's attacks are all random, you never know if next time you jump you're just going to be air puffed. You just have to try to beat Wispy as fast as possible and hope you get lucky. And there's no 1-ups in this stage, meaning you have to go through the entire stage for just one attempt at Wispy. We have to learn all that stuff I just told you on the fly while keeping your fingers crossed that the air puffs don't just end the run. Can you see why this took hours? I still really like fighting Extra Game Wispy with minimum health, but the air puffs and having to start over every time mixed terribly together, making an experience that went beyond frustrating and just got demoralizing. But eventually, it was over. Wispy went down. We celebrated. But in our minds, there was also fear. If the first stage was that hard, what will the following stages bring?
In terms of Castle Lolo, not much. I mean, it took literally less than one episode to complete. But Philip, how did minimum health, minimum lives affect the Lolo and Lala boss fight? I'm so glad you asked. Because of the added stakes, I went for boxes when I knew I could get them, which meant I waited even more! Can we please move on now?
Float Islands was very hard to route. The first room has a lot of stuff flying in from off-screen, and a lot of sections where floating is necessary, which makes it hard to tell how to avoid a lot of it. Room 2 is fine, and man have I never been happier to see a 1-up, but Room 3 introduces these blasties, and they do this! So yeah, even harder to figure out. Even now I'm not sure if I have the timing on these two quite right. And of course, after all of that, there's Kabula. Kabula is the boss I had been dreading the entire run. Her attacks only do 1 damage each, but they are highly randomized, and some seem so fast as to be impossible to avoid. Because of the Mint Leaf, Kirby has infinite attacks, but Kabula takes 40 hits to defeat. In Extra Game, this meant for a short and intense fight, where we both try to whittle down the other's health first. With minimum health, it meant this! I held down. And every time I game overed, I had to go through all of Float Islands again, but I kept at it, until finally... I give up. I still had time left in the recording session, but I knew I wasn't going to make it. I didn't know if I could ever beat Kabula with 1 health, and even if I did, I would have had to fight both her and Wispy again at Mount Dedede. So, I cut my losses. And I lost everything.
No save data, remember? I wasn't willing to give up on the run completely, but I decided to designate it a bonus video, so I could get on it on my own time, I guess. In the meantime, I'd move on to Kirby's Adventure. I didn't like it, but I was kind of out of options.
The last and most important aspect of this version is saving. Unlike with the 3DS version, there's no save states.
On October 12th, 2020, I bought Kirby's Dream Land on my sister's Nintendo 2DS XL. The plan was simple. I would practice on Kabula using the save states in the Virtual Console version, and maybe, just maybe, I'd be able to beat her 7 consistently. I didn't think I could, and I knew it was possible because there are YouTube videos out there, but I don't think I could do it. But I had to try. Hundreds and hundreds of attempts went by, And eventually I beat her. Once. So I kept going at it. For a while it felt like I wasn't making any progress. I was just brute forcing it. Eventually out of luck I'd get a win. But slowly, as the weeks went by, I started to get wins a little more frequently. And then a little more frequently. It was grueling, demoralizing work, but eventually I started to make progress. And I started to pick up a few tips and tricks along the way.
Kabula is vulnerable when she first flies in, so around a quarter of her health can be whittled down before she even attacks, of which she has 3. In order of most to least fair, they are the triple shot, the charge, and the zigzag shots. The triple shot fires 3 shots in the same pattern every time. It usually comes out slow enough that when I die to one, I mostly blame myself. The charge either goes up, down, or straight, but it doesn't fully reach the corners. In the middle of any of the charge zones, it can be pretty much impossible to dodge, but the attack is rare enough that it rarely becomes an issue. The zigzags are sometimes homing, and can be shot in groups of 1 or 3. Because of how the homing works, usually when they're shot as 3, there's a bigger gap between 2 of them that can be passed through. Don't beat Kabula while at the top of the screen, because when it pans down, it will kill you. Kabula goes up and down regularly, and all shots originate from her cannon. This adds an element of risk versus reward, as Kirby can only shoot directly in front of him, meaning he has to be somewhat in the line of fire to do damage.
It took a while before I could actually implement any of these strategies effectively. Let me tell you, the first time I intentionally went through 2 zigzag shots, it felt amazing, and it caused me to realize something fascinating. I was having fun again. And I used to wonder how in the world speedrunning and stuff like that could ever be fun. But I think I understand now, because as long as you feel like you can do something, it can still feel fun, no matter how difficult. In fact, that difficulty will make it feel more gratifying when you finally do complete the challenge.
I actually did more than just practice Kabula within my practicing time. I took a day to route out bubbly clouds, I practiced Wispy and Dedede a bit, and this is actually what I learned a lot of the strategy for Wispy. I also accidentally deleted some of the gameplay footage from the September 19th run, including the entirety of Castle Lololo. Honestly, I'm just grateful nothing of value was lost. Oh, and I decided to actually try that run with max lives, minimum health, mostly to see if the practice I was getting on the 2DS XL would transfer to the GBA. And that's when I started to notice a difference in how these consoles play, mostly in their buttons. The 2DS XL feels more clicky overall. When using the D-pad on this console, you can hear when a direction is pressed. The 4 directions on the pad almost feel like their own buttons. On the GBA, the D-pad feels a lot more like one piece, and has a bit more depth to it. It feels more analog, while the 2DS feels more digital, if that makes any sense. Something similar can be said about the buttons. The 2DS XL ones feel like a click, while the GBA ones feel like a press. The 2DS XL is more precise, but I feel like Kirby's Dream Land benefits more from the GBA controls. For example, Kirby can't move when inhaling, nor can he stop inhaling until this animation is completed, and any inputs made during that animation get eaten. Little annoyances like that stick out a bit more with the more precise 2DS XL controls. However, the difference is barely noticeable. The big difference I noticed is when mashing for the Kabula boss fight. I could easily mash the 2DS XL buttons faster than Kirby could shoot in this game, and it kinda throws me off. Kirby just doesn't feel like he's shooting as fast as he should be, and I think a bunch of the inputs get eaten, making the shooting somewhat uneven. The GBA is slower to mash, and therefore matches up with the game better. The added depth to the button also just feels more tactile and satisfying to mash. I also decided to do a few quick runs through of normal and extra game on an original Game Boy after I wrote most of the script, which puts our total amount of playthroughs at way too many. While the Game Boy has the same tactile feeling of the GBA, its buttons are bigger, and for some reason felt a bit less satisfying to mash. The D-pad is also bigger, which makes it feel less like one piece, although definitely still more than the 2DS XL. When playing back-to-back, the control on Kirby's movement felt a little more fluid with the GBA. That being said, the real difference I noticed was the screen. It was a lot easier to appreciate the work put into making things visible when you're playing on the original screen. Plus some effects, like the beam, look a bit better on the Game Boy screen because you can't tell that it's made of individual shapes as easily. It didn't always stick the landing, the space part of Bubbly Clouds comes to mind, but I'd say they did a pretty swell job. Still, as much as I like the classic green look of the Game Boy, I think I prefer the custom coloring job they did for the GBA. Well, for the most part anyway. All these observations are nitpicks that don't affect the game too much, but I found them interesting.
And that's all I did during my practicing period. It's not an official run, but it was integral to my experience with the game. It's where I developed my Wispy, Kabula, and DDD strategies. It's where I learned how I interact with difficult challenges. It's where my entire virtual console experience with the game was. It was important, and even though I couldn't 100% beat Kabula every single time, I did feel like I was good enough that I could try the final run again. I was ready.
On January 9th, 2021, Sam and I met again to finally beat this game. We spent a little less than an hour on Green Greens and less than 15 minutes in Castle Lolo. Then I got to Kabula with 3 lives and beat her on the 3rd. Originally, Extra Games Bubbly Clouds was really tricky because of this first room in Krakow Jr. Most of the stuff that was tricky the first time, however, was thwarted just by knowing it existed beforehand. And it turns out, if you duck, you can beat Krakow Jr. by just staying in this corner. Spirits were high as we entered Mount Dedede, having not lost a single life on Bubbly Clouds. The strategy for Mount Dedede was to fight the bosses from hardest to easiest, so that I was less likely to fail and have wasted the entire attempt near the end. In this level, I had to beat both Kabula and Wispy Woods in one go. No small feat. And yet, the stars just seemed to keep aligning. I beat Wispy after the first time I beat Kabula on Mount Dedede. After that, we were pretty much home free. Okay. This is revenge for how I called you lame all those times, isn't it? No matter, it wasn't that hard to beat both Wispy and Kabula in a row the first time, so I'll just do it again.
So, one life passed me, and
Okay, that took a lot longer than the first time. Luckily, I didn't screw up on Lolo and Wawa again. No, dang it! There we go! Man, let me tell you, the checkpoint right before DD has got to be the best design decision in this game. It meant that I could relax and enjoy the final challenge. DD's fight doesn't change drastically with minimum health, but it does mean that I was forced to master the boss fight, which is just fun. It felt hard but fair, without the dread of having to do the whole level over again, like every other boss in this game.
And then it was over. It was never the hardest of the 4 runs, and it was also frustrating for most of it, but just like my original Extreme Game run, it deepened my respect for this game. I mean, this is when I truly understood Wispy Woods, and despite the predictable frustration, I also had a lot of fun perfecting Kabula, Wispy, and Dedede in a way that I really hadn't had to. In the end, it was cathartic to finally beat this mode, and I don't regret the grueling work that went into it.
So does that mean you'd recommend people try the challenge?
No, of course not! It's still a really frustrating run, and most people don't want to grind one boss out for 4 months. I mean, even if you went maximum lives, minimum health, you still have to grind out Kabula. Look, Configure It is a really fun, cool bonus, but the game's really just not built around it. So, overall, I think I'd give this game don't worry, I will never do this joke again. Out of 10! What do you think about my first review, Sammy?
Well, you spent most of the time rambling about a challenge mode you made up and don't recommend anyone ever attempting ever, and a lot of the rest of it was talking about recording issues that the average person wouldn't have, leaving a very small sliver of the review actually talking about Kirby's Dream Land.
Because all of that was important to my experience. Remember, we thought we'd be moving on to an adventure on the very same day we started Kirby's Dream Land. And part of it was just because this is a short game. But another part of it was because Kirby's Adventure was more exciting. And yet, completing this game was an unforgettable emotional roller coaster. I went from bored to intrigued to frustrated to despairing to respectful to triumphant. Sure, objectively, this is kind of a mediocre game. I mean, Extra Mode is cool, but it's also kind of frustrating. And yet, this whole crazy experience has carved it a permanent place in my heart. No objective review can fully predict how someone's going to interact and experience a video game. I guess I just wanted to share how I experienced this one. You know, when I decided to start this whole Kirby project, it was kind of on a whim, but after playing through this game, I think I'm excited for what's still to come, and I hope that you all experience it with me. Are they gone? Are they gone? I think they are gone. Okay. Well, gotta get that first review out of the way. I'm gonna clean up this place. Hoppity, 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 hoppity. Oh, sorry, this fell over. Anywho, so I guess the natural question is, what's next?